Before we start the program, I have a couple of announcements to make. First of all, please be advised that this session is being recorded. Secondly, we have available translations in Spanish, French, Korean, and Chinese. So you may click the interpretation button at the bottom part of the Zoom room, and then choose the language you would like to hear. Thirdly, to ensure that background noises will not distract the participants, everyone's microphones are muted. Videos are also turned off so that we can save on bandwidth for the benefit of participants whose internet connections may be unstable. And then finally, if you have any questions for our guest speaker, please send them to me via the chat box. This is Deanie Ocampo, your moderator. For our participants on Facebook, you may type your questions in the comments section. So may I call on Merly Pimentel, President of the Brahma Kumaris Philippines Spiritual Foundation, to give the welcome message. Merly?
Thank you very much, Deanie. And Om Shanti, greetings to peace, and heartfelt welcome to everyone. Welcome to our first national public program after almost 2.5 years of the pandemic and the lockdown. Our program entitled Keeping the Mind Clear in Any Crisis is indeed appropriate at this time when the world is steeped with listlessness, fear, uncertainty, ambiguity. So I am indeed very excited to listen to the timeless strategies that our sister Denise will be sharing with us. And I hope that the session will be able to spark deeper as well as deeper understanding and reflection in us towards creating creative solution or finding creative solutions to our continuing adversities and challenges. The Brahma Kumaris is a spiritual organization that teaches Raj Yoga meditation, through which one is able to energize as well as purify the mind. So let us sit back, listen with full attention to the gems of wisdom that Sister Denise will share with us. And for all you know, you might be able to really capture and get these gems that will certainly change the trajectory as well as the quality of our lives. So Om Shanti and welcome to everyone. Shanti.
Thank you very much, Merly, for the warm and loving greetings from the Philippines. Good afternoon. I am Deanie Lyn Ocampo, your moderator for today's program. We have no shortage of crises today, from our unique individual lives to shared collective experiences on a societal and global scale. There's a clear understanding that we are in exceptional times. The global COVID-19 pandemic made this very real for us all around the world. Many, if not all of us, dealt with the loss of loved ones, economic and financial difficulties. Our news feeds are also hardly lacking in reports of waged wars, armed conflict, racial violence, and humanitarian emergencies. The invasion of Ukraine is one example, but there are ongoing, lesser-known wars too in Afghanistan, Ethiopia, Yemen, which the United Nations calls the worst humanitarian disaster. For many of the world's poor and most marginalized, crises take on a daily face, whether or not they are deemed newsworthy. Poverty, hunger, displacements have become daily disasters. Amidst all this, our planet is reeling in what scientists label as the sixth great extinction, when the Earth's biodiversity is being lost at a catastrophic rate. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, which is a body of hundreds of scientists worldwide, says we are now in code red for humanity and the Earth's life-sustaining systems. A small window remains for us to revert the climate crisis. In the context of all these layered crises, however, we may know, understand, and experience them in our daily lives, wherever we are in the world today. Sister Denise's talk hopes to guide us on how to make sense of it all, how we can interpret it, and how we can transcend it. So just a quick walkthrough of our program this afternoon. For the next 45 minutes, probably around till 5 p.m., Sister Denise will give her talk with meditation exercises before, during, at the end of each segment of her talk. And then for the next 45 minutes, we will have conversations with her. Again, kindly post your questions for Sister Denise in the chat box addressed to me, Deanie Lyn Ocampo, Moderator. Our participants on Facebook may as well post your questions in the comments section. And around 5:45 p.m., 6 p.m. in Manila, we will wrap up this session and we will give some announcements. Sister Denise Lawrence is an esteemed teacher of the Brahma Kumaris Spiritual University for more than 50 years. She is currently based in southern France. She's a widely read author and much sought after international speaker on various platforms. Her lectures, either live or online, on subjects acutely relevant to the times, are acclaimed for their coherence and depth. Welcome, Sister Denise. The virtual floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Deanie, and thank you to Merle for your introduction of the Brahma Kumaris. Well, let us begin with a moment of quiet reflection, and I would like to give you an image to consider in your quiet reflection. Go deep within and think about yourself as a beautiful, fluffy caterpillar who has been going through life, eating the leaves of the plant where it was born, until there are almost no leaves left. The whole plant has been devoured by your great appetite. And the time has come to spin your cocoon, and silk threads automatically start surrounding you. Maybe you feel a little afraid because it's different. You have eaten your fill, there's nothing more to eat. And now you are resting, turning within, allowing the silk threads to surround you in a soft, comfortable cocoon, protected for a deep slumber. In your sleep, things start changing. Your sense of self gradually fades and disintegrates. You lose your sense of being a caterpillar altogether. Something new is awakening within you. Part of you clings to the old, but another part awaits change, metamorphosis, eagerly. It's a conflict within, but yet the power of the metamorphosis is great. And you have to allow it, because you know deep within that all this leads to the emergence of the beautiful, delicate butterfly. Om Shanti. This is the image I would like you to hold as I talk about crisis and how we can keep the mind stable and steady. Because crisis is always felt to be something really terrible. Everyone who sees climate change, the wars, the shortage of food supply, the violence, the catastrophes that are mounting upon us as something that must at all costs be resisted. And if we look at all of it together, and there are some who do, they feel hopeless. They feel that it's too late, and some become depressed, some become desperate, and others close their eyes and hope that it will go away. But you can't just make a crisis go away like that. I think we can say that there has never been times of crisis at the level that we are facing them at this time. That records are being broken every day, and it is really very difficult to make sense of. So today I would like us to take a look at this image of the metamorphosis of the caterpillar into the butterfly, which is so often used, but I think a lot of people, when they take up this metaphor, they think, well, the caterpillar, he just eats away, and then he just makes a cocoon, and then he just sleeps for a while, and one fine day he breaks out of the cocoon and flies into the sunshine, landing on a lovely flower as a beautiful butterfly, and it's as simple as that. But in fact it isn't. This metamorphosis is a series of crises for the insect. We are surrounded by insects, but less and less, because the insect population has been devastated by agricultural pesticides and change of habitat, loss of habitat, and when there are no more insects, there's no more world, because our world depends on food, which happens due to the pollination of the insects. So insects are really very important. And the life cycle of an insect is fraught with crises, because it's about transformation. In India, which is the place where the practice and study of Raj Yoga originates, there are some interesting words to describe transformation. And one word that I would present to you, the word is parivartan. Parivartan, a word from the Hindi language, means transformation, but it has an extended meaning, which is a return to the pristine original condition. And this return takes place in the midst of massive and multiple crises. And so this image is quite relevant for us, because it helps us to understand what kind of a mindset we need to adopt in order to get through this crisis. Because it is a return to our original pristine state. But we cannot do that just so easily and simply as we normally hear about the story of the caterpillar who becomes a chrysalis, who then becomes a butterfly. And it all sounds so easy. But let us look a little bit at what happens in the chrysalis, because that is the deep, secret, internal world of transformation, total metamorphosis. And what happens inside the chrysalis? Well, the body of the caterpillar begins to melt and break down totally. And most of the time in the chrysalis, the contents of the chrysalis is like a gooey mess, where the insect is not a caterpillar and it's not a butterfly either. It is a very fragile, subtle state where everything is totally melted down. And so some of you might sometimes feel that you are in a meltdown, and it feels very, very upsetting. It produces anxiety. You don't know what to do, where to turn. Nobody likes to be in meltdown. But yet, it is part of the transformation process. After some time, what begins to happen is something called imaginal cells form within that grey, gooey mess that is the melted down caterpillar. And these imaginal cells strive to take the form of the butterfly, but they're alien to that caterpillar mindedness. And so the energy of the caterpillar destroys those imaginal cells, and then feels better. I'm back to my normal self. I recognize my identity. I don't know what this alien stuff is that's going on inside me, but we have to resist it, put a stop to it, and get back to normal. But then more imaginal cells form. Again, you destroy them. Again, more form, and they start to become more powerful. And the sense of identity of the caterpillar is weak. Anyway, the caterpillar is in meltdown, And these imaginal cells are beginning to take over. And there is strong, strong resistance within that melted down caterpillar. But ultimately, it has to give up. And the imaginal cells suddenly and rapidly take over. The butterfly is formed very fast. And then the chrysalis breaks open and the butterfly dries its wings for a moment and then flies free into a beautiful sunny day with no recollection whatsoever of having been a caterpillar. So this is very useful and relevant metaphor for us because it lets us understand what's going on. Whenever you have this feeling that the world is in meltdown, or you are in meltdown, or your family is in meltdown, and it's a really horrible, critical situation. We heard about the wars, especially there's a lot of coverage of the war in Ukraine, where everything is just getting destroyed, and people are dying and hungry and diseased, and it's just absolutely terrible. And everyone says, do something, protect these people, stop this destruction. But yet it's going on. Climate change. So many parts of the world, people are hardly able to breathe and live, can't get water, it's too hot, the crops are failing, it's unbearable. You can't turn off the sun. You can't do anything about climate change, or whatever we try to do, people don't take it seriously, and it continues to go. The glaciers continue to melt, the storms get worse, and people suffer. So we are in crisis, but what we need to be aware about is that this crisis itself is part of a transition that's going on. And if we don't know what's going on, it's very scary, and it paralyzes us or makes us hysterical. But if we do know what's going on, then it becomes possible for us to be more of an active participant in the change. And it requires quite a lot of courage. As you heard in the metaphor, what happens inside that chrysalis is that there is something welling up inside the insect, which is future change. And people are afraid of change because they don't know it, because it's uncharted territory. People, as it is said, you prefer the hell you know to the heaven you don't know, and that you don't believe in. But we need to understand that whatever has been what we are used to, it no longer functions, and it is a kind of huge epochal change going on in the world, a huge change going on for humanity itself. And change is something that can only happen when there is an intense crisis. And so we need to know what is the change. In the metaphor, this melted down caterpillar turns into a beautiful butterfly, but it cannot relate to that butterfly. All it knows is that there is something going on which is taking over, and it's fighting for its survival. And you may feel sometimes that you are also fighting for your survival, and something really negative is taking over. You may feel that the takeover is coming from external forces that you cannot control. But there are also internal forces that are going on. And internal forces, when we're talking about the whole globe, these forces are subtle. They're actually spiritual forces. They are natural. They are connected with what happens when you reach extreme. So crisis and extreme go together. There are some modes of healing where the patient is brought to a crisis point so that the disease can be expelled from the patient's body. And this is a crisis. Fever is a crisis. The extremes of an eruption of a disease in some modalities are said to be very good, and that the patient just has to be very patient and get through it, because that illness doesn't belong in the body, and the only way it can get expelled is by an eruption through the fire of a fever. And for some people they can get through it, for some people they just don't have the strength. So what that means for us is that it's very important when going through critical times for us to build strength, because the one who is strong can get through a crisis. Someone who is freaked out by a crisis and loses all the energy in anxiety and distress is not able to consolidate the necessary resilience to get through the change process. And so one of the reasons why we give importance to meditation and spiritual study is the spiritual study gives us an angle on change that we can work with. And the meditation enables us to draw power into ourselves, spiritual power into ourselves, so that we can actually cultivate adequate resilience and power to get through it, and to protect ourselves from losing all our energy in being afraid, and because we need all the strength we can get to do this. Now, I'm not trying to make everybody afraid, but I am saying that it is important for us to consolidate our strength, and definitely to understand that the resistance that we are applying to the process of change actually takes away the energy that we need to get through the critical times and emerge like that beautiful butterfly. And so let's look at the imaginal cells. On the one hand, they're alien, they're felt to be an invasion, you don't like them, you want to get rid of them. So this is a reference to all the things that we see in our lives, personal, professional, societal, global, all the things that we see going on that we don't like. And our cultural background confirms that all these things are bad, they're negative, they have to be stopped, they have to be resisted. And there is nothing in our culture that says we should embrace this change, we should like all this destruction that's going on. There's nothing like that. So our natural and automatic response is to resist as hard as we possibly can. And this is what mostly everyone is doing. But what happens when you resist? The thing that you resist gets stronger. If a person has some situation where they have a lot of pain, it may be emotional, it may be societal, it may be to do with their physical or mental health, maybe to do with their relationships. But the more you resist, the worse it gets, until your strength is totally drained and it overpowers you. And basically what I'm saying is we should be careful not to let ourselves get into a situation like that. So how do we keep ourselves free from our natural impulses to resist the things that are painful, the things that are bad, the things that we know very well need to be resisted? So it means we need to go deep inside. This is one of the very important things. And so I'd like us to have another meditation about what is the meaning of going deep inside and what happens when you go deep inside and how do you go deep inside. So let's just take a minute for that. So let yourself be easy and very gently, very slowly let go of your concerns. They are what they are. Just for a moment, set them aside. And go very close to yourself. There are many layers of your being, layers of culture and conditioning, life experience, which have molded you and make you what you are today. But let's try going deep beneath those layers to find the essence of the self. It is very deep, so take time to go down and down and reach a state of the self, what it was like to be you before anything ever happened. You make contact with an incredible strength, a truth about yourself, which is different from all the messages you heard from the world, reflecting you back to yourself. Your truth, your essence is different. It's nothing to do with your gender, your culture, religion, profession. All that is external. There is a purity within that is extraordinary. and powerful. It is very different from the identity that you're used to. It is more real. It is beautiful. You would never you would never betray yourself. You would never allow anyone or anything to take you over and mold you. You connect with your individual, perfect, essential self that is invincible, that is clean, free, and very special, valuable, and important. Feel that. Compare your essence with what happened to you over time. And allow that essential self to come into being. And let that old self fall away. It's not serving you anymore. And it's not real. Feel that beautiful butterfly of the essential self taking shape. Allow the old caterpillar to go and be with that new essential self. Om Shanti. So this is a very important practice so that you can really know these two energies. One is the essential self, which is real, but it's been abandoned because of time, circumstances, life experience. So it kind of hid away in a corner of your being, but it gets activated by critical times. It gets activated and it also gets threatened because you resist it. You don't know it. You're not familiar with it. You don't realize this is the reality of you. And when you're in your blossomed state, you feel the world differently, you know the world differently, but we are inside the chrysalis and these forces are acting on us, and our natural instinct is to resist that inner reality because we are so connected with the outer reality. Whatever we see and hear and feel and touch, that's all outer reality. is very powerful, very strong. And we have created all sorts of methods and systems to make sure that it stays in order. The thing is that they don't work anymore. Maybe they used to work. We have customer relations regarding products. We have democratic system regarding governance. We have laws that govern medical practices and criminal behavior and all of these things. But they're breaking down. All our systems are breaking down because they're predicated on the assumption that the things that are bad, the things that break down are not the norm, they are the exception. But then they start to become the norm, and the pure, loving motivation in people becomes more and more the exception, because people don't have the strength to be that, to live that way, to function. They're just seeing that it doesn't work and that you have to resort to other means just for survival. And so it means we've passed a tipping point. And that's very important to know when we're dealing with handling crisis. When you pass a tipping point and you know that the external arrangements are not holding together, they're not holding up. And it feels very, very scary to have faith, so much faith in the self, so much faith in destiny, so much faith in the durability of the natural and the human world. It's hard for people to have so much faith in that we will get through the crisis. The natural world, the human world, the animal world. As Deanie mentioned, the scientists have called this the sixth great extinction. I don't think very many of them are calling it that, but quite a few are. And has this happened 6 times? Well, if it has, it means we got through it 6 times, and so, or 5 times. And so it means that we can get through it again. But in order to get through it, we need to have this stable, steady mind. So thinking again about the caterpillar, there comes a point, like a tipping point within the chrysalis, where the caterpillar actually abandons the resistance and holding on to being a caterpillar, even in the melted down state. But that happens only just before the end of the transformation, because the imaginal cells take over quickly after having passed all these attempts to destroy them. They come back again and again, stronger and stronger, while the caterpillar nature gets weaker and weaker and eventually lets go. And this is, I think, what we need to do. It's a kind of letting go, but not abandoning. It's letting go of resistance and coming forth with great courage and great optimism to know that getting through this dark night of human and natural catastrophes is necessarily followed by a beautiful dawn, and we have to hold on and hold out and get through it, because the night of our sorrows and distress is actually falling away. and a new dawn is indeed coming. And you can feel it in your soul, you can feel it in your bones, and yet it's a matter of having faith in it. Sometimes it feels like a nice dream. Sometimes we get very cynical about these things. Sometimes we just do anything to hold on to any possible way of resisting the terrible things that seem to be coming towards us on the horizon. But yet, remember this image, remember that this is a natural process, and in order to achieve success, we must not waste our energy on resisting. We must hold our energy. We must get new energy. This is why meditation is so helpful. Take power into yourself through connection with the divine source. And what happens? The imaginal cells of the future begin to be very strong, and you start to function as you need to function in a future world, and you start to begin to see attributes of that happening. When you abandon your anxiety and distress and hold your mind steady, things start to go better for you. In fact, quite well. And this is very helpful to observe because it gives you a little conviction, a little faith that, yeah, there is something good coming, and you are part of that. You have a choice. You can be part of what's falling apart by letting yourself fall apart, or you can be part of what's coming by holding yourself in your purest, essential state, because that is really the real state of you. When something gets old, then you replace it with a new one. But when the soul gets old, you can't get a new soul, but the old, worn-out soul needs to get repaired and restored and rejuvenated. And it is through absorbing the spiritual power into the self that all this rejuvenation comes. So let us complete with another meditation about how we really take that power. So let yourself once again become quiet. You're aware of the darkness of our troubled times. You're aware of your distress about it. But you're also aware of the increasing power of that inner light. You're drawn to it, attracted. It feels right. As you go very deep inside, you do become aware of another light from beyond. A tangible power that is there for you. You can connect. Open yourself up and let that light flow into you. It is a subtle, gentle, extraordinarily powerful energy that softly enters your soul. The light within increases. You feel empowered to be your real self. Negative reactions are dim, fading away. They don't have a hold over you. You feel detached, compassionate, but not overwhelmed by the state of the world. Someone, something is looking out for you. Making it possible for you to see past the darkness, and the light of the future is slightly visible. You move towards that light, letting it in, letting it pass through you, letting it spread. You're a conduit for change, an agent for a beautiful change for the better. You understand what you're for. You understand how this works, and you're comfortable, no longer resisting the light. You just allow the darkness to fade away into the past, and you bring a new dawn for the world. Om Shanti. Now, many people would think, now, this is not going to work, this is not going to do anything. But I have been working with these things for just about 50 years, which is quite a long time, really, a whole lifetime, really. And I have been noticing serious, irrevocable change taking place within myself. Now, it took time, and making these kinds of changes and becoming really in your power doesn't come easy. It takes a lot of perseverance, patience, faith. It will happen. And when you start to see results and you understand the butterfly can never go back to being a caterpillar once it has passed through that tipping point. In the same way, for us, to be willing to put in the time and the energy, this is what you get: irreversible, positive, stable change. And it's just all about maintaining that mentality in your mind. So I feel very, very optimistic about the future, and that gives me a lot of energy, and it enables me to get past different crises quite well. You know, those moments where you feel overwhelmed with anxiety for no particular reason? You'll find those disappear, they melt, they go away. They're part of the caterpillar. They don't have any business in the future. And you can actually make all of those feelings calm down quite quickly and get on with moving towards a bright future. So thank you very much, and Om Shanti.
Thank you very much, Sister Denise. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for guiding us, walking us through how we should look at crisis, how to interpret crisis, and how to, of course, in the end, very positively, hopefully, transcend crisis that we see around the world, and even crisis in our own families and with ourselves. How can we, there's a question here, how can we handle a crisis within one's family where a member has been feeling disheartened about what he or she sees around him or her, when honesty and goodness do not matter anymore, and crime thrives, and you see evil around? How do you handle that? How do you help a family member overcome cynicism and hopelessness?
Well, if it's one member of the family who's feeling like that, and it's an influence, definitely it affects the whole family. But then maybe there are other members of the family who are thinking about things differently. Mm-hmm. And that is also an influence. It's really this image of the conflict going on inside that caterpillar. Are you going to be part of the caterpillar that's anyway melting down and going away? Or are you going to be part of what is becoming the butterfly? And I think that the metaphor is really very powerful, because it says that, as long as you don't disturb the chrysalis, the process of becoming a butterfly is ongoing, though you can't look at it. And if by chance you open up that chrysalis, you stop the process and everything will be gone. There will be no butterfly at all. You'll just see a grey, gooey mess falling on the floor, and that will be that. So I think it's just very important for those in the family who want to be part of that butterfly, who want to be part of that change, to allow it within their own selves, because it's a very powerful influence. And then the other one, who sees all the negativity, can be actually drawn by your influence into an understanding that, yes, crime appears to be thriving, everything appears to be really going badly, but that's that part of the process that is negative. But we also have to bring in a little bit the idea of the law of karma, And the law of karma is that whatever you do, whatever you think, whatever you say, there are consequences. And if you think and speak and act in such a way that you're producing that positive future, and that you have faith in goodness within your own self, and that you're not going to allow the negativity of others to take over, then you become the agent for change. And it does require action. We cannot do this passively. We have to act. But there's a difference between acting to bring things into a positive condition and being so preoccupied with resisting the negative things that you give your power to the negativity, and that makes it stronger.
So, Sister Denise, you are a firm believer that positive thinking will suffice, that it will create that kind of energy that can influence people around you and probably the society or systems around you.
I'm not saying that it will suffice. I'm saying it's a very important ingredient. There are many things. Positive thinking, that's your energy. But, what's also necessary is to bring in another energy, which is the real agent for change. Because the thing is, if it's just positive thinking, it won't suffice. It's an ingredient. But in order to make the real pie, you have to have all the ingredients. And this is why we have a spiritual study and a practice and so on, because you have to gather together all the ingredients, understand them, experiment with them, and apply them. And so I've been very lucky. I had the opportunity to study this and practice this and be with excellent mentors. And so I've been able to take it quite far. And you just have to have all the ingredients. But to begin with, we have to have positive thinking. But we need to really understand the whole thing and have patience in the process of understanding it. It's very subtle. It's not so easy. It's different. But we have to start somewhere.
Sister Denise, you mentioned a while ago, you led us into a meditation exercise where we experience how to cultivate the butterfly of the essential self, which is the real self. No? How do you cultivate this through time? As you said, it would require a lot of internal work. So how do you sustain? How do you cultivate? And then how do you sustain this through time? You've mentioned perseverance, patience in oneself, etc. But it's part of a larger set of work that we have to really give time to. So can you elaborate on this point?
Yeah, I think it's very important to make contact with and develop relationship with people who are also doing this, because it adds to the power of it. Just one person by themselves, if they're really strong, that's great. But generally, one candle is not as bright as 100 candles. So we need to kind of have, all of us are in contact with people, and some of them are really positive and some of them are really negative. But I think we need to have so much faith in ourselves that we feel worthy and valuable, because then we will seek the company of people who are also like that. Once we start feeling negative about ourselves, then we don't really feel like having company of people who are, brighter than ourselves. So we look for darker people, and that's actually counterproductive. But we need to intensify our sense of self. And this is why the study and the meditation practice, individually, collectively, it helps with that a great deal. And then you keep going, you see. This is important.
Sister Denise, for someone who's just beginning in the meditation practice, how can he or she, how can one find enough time to do this? If crisis is the norm nowadays, how can one find enough time to do meditation practice and work on the self and believe that by working on the self, it would have positive effects?
Well, everybody thinks, right? All the time you're thinking something or another. And I like to go for walks. And so I have a beautiful park just near where I live. So I like to go for my walk there, my morning walk. And I walk for about an hour. And there's lots of other people there. And all of them are talking on their cell phones. And they're talking things which are quite mundane. But talking. That means thinking. Mundane things. Talking about this person and this happened and that happened. That's time. That's actually very time consuming. There are lots of periods of time in the day when you're doing something and thinking something else at the same time. So the key is to notice what you're thinking while you're doing things. What are you thinking while you're walking? What are you thinking while you're driving? What are you thinking while you're in the public transport? What are you thinking while you're cleaning your house or making food or eating food or, doing repetitive tasks? We all spend quite a lot of time doing those things, and that's the time when the sort of negative thinking or negative talking happens, and it's optional. And so I think that just to start by just deciding to check on the self, okay, what am I thinking right now? Do I have to be thinking that? What's it going to do? Is there something I could be thinking that would be creating a better atmosphere and vibration? Why don't I do that? I can. It's entirely up to me. There's time. But we waste time.
So we really have to be mindful of how we use time, as it is a very important resource in life. Okay, Sister Denise, thank you. One of the participants sent this message. Thank you for the very clear explanation, and even the meditations are so helpful. What you are now saying is the guarantee of the practice.
I think we must become the butterflies. We cannot just sit in the cocoon all the time. Time is passing.
Yes.
And it will open up. Yeah.
Okay. Sister Denise, you mentioned a while ago an Indian word, parivartan, and you said that it means transformation or a return to the pristine original state. Can you further explain this? Are we right now? Is this a particular time in the world? How do you say this? Is this a particular part in the world timeline that there is a movement to return to a pristine original state?
I think there is, and there are many cycles in the world. Our own life cycle. What happens to a human being? They get born, and newborn babies are absolutely cute and beautiful, and they smell nice and all these things, and then they grow, they become a bit naughty, and then life goes on, and you grow up, you get educated, things happen, you get married, you get children, maybe you get sick, maybe some drama happens, then slowly you get old, your body begins to break down, and eventually no one is exempt. We pass on. And no one really knows what happens after that. But in India, there is this idea of reincarnation, so that you start again. The old person becomes a child, and it goes on and on and on. But overall, the soul gets tired, the body, the natural elements of matter, they get gradually weaker and more polluted, entropy. And then there comes a time when, like, the whole world needs to become that beautiful butterfly which it was originally. And so what you mentioned about the scientists talking about the sixth extinction, or there could be 6 or 7 or 8 or 100 or 2, who knows? But there is a time when globally there is a huge transformation, and everyone has to be filled with their essential power. The elements of matter have to be restored to their original perfection. And this is that time where everything is so polarized, where everything is breaking down and something new is coming. So this is what we're going through. So we have to hold out and hold on and let go of what is not needed and open up for receiving the very good energy that is actually there and coming. But we can't take it in unless we open to it,
Okay, thank you, Sister Denise. That is really something that we should put our hope on, that despite the crisis, despite the very gloomy outlook that we see around us, there is something that's happening, transformative and beautiful, that will happen soon. So it gives us also a wider perspective of things to come, and that we have to be hope-filled, and have the faith also that this beautiful transformation, collectively, worldwide, global, will happen soon. Thank you for that, Sister Denise.
I think we can't say it will happen. I think we need to say it is happening, but it's happening at a very subtle level. And so some people can feel it and notice it, many people can't. But as it gets stronger, people are able to feel it and see it. And that's really the thing. Because if you can't feel it, you think, oh, it might happen, it may happen, maybe it won't happen. But if you can feel it, then it makes more sense to be part of that. And the more subtle you make yourself, the more easily you can feel it.
Okay, Sister Denise, here's another question. You mentioned that to become part of what's coming, or what is already happening, to be very conscious that we are transforming from the old to the new. Once we are empowered, does that mean that we can now go back into action in the world, and not just we need not resist, but because of our empowered selves, we can still do something in action on the world stage? And then how do we also relate that empowered self with structural givens which we do not have much control of? How do we situate our empowered selves in the givens out there, that there are structural things that need to be changed, but we may not be able to really change significantly because we do not have any control of those? How can one's empowerment improve these givens?
I think it can. There are many people who are caregivers and who do good in the world, but then they burn out and they stop. They can't do it anymore for one reason or another. And I think when you are empowering yourself constantly and you create balance, you have to act, but you also have to make sure that you are not getting burned out, that you are filling yourself. I think it's quite important to realize that you are not responsible for making the world a better place. You are responsible for doing your bit, and but not for the whole thing. If a person tries to do the whole thing, and I've encountered many like this, they just destroy themselves in the process because it is too big. So on the one hand, there is a greater power, a greater force that is operating at this time. On the other hand, we need to take strength from that source and make ourselves sustained and maintain our ability to keep on going indefinitely. But as long as we go out of balance and overwork and do not take care of ourselves, then we can't. There's a saying, God helps those who help themselves. And we shouldn't forget that one, because it's so easy to lose one's sense of taking care of oneself while trying to fix all the things that need fixing. So it's all to do with maintaining a very optimistic outlook, not overdoing it, realizing you're not responsible. There will be things that succeed, there will be things that don't succeed, but you keep going, and you keep your feelings good, and move through stuff. There are many, many bad things that will be happening, but they come, they take place, and they go, and you don't lose sight of where you're going. I think that's a very good way to do it. Don't give up.
Most of the time, Sister Denise, I hear parents in the Philippines, we just had our national elections. And many of my friends who are parents and grandparents would tell me that they would vote for this and that candidate because they would like to already start building the country that they want for their children and grandchildren. So it is that level of hope that we expect from our leaders that make it so frustrating if we do not get the leaders that we think should be able to live out the values that are important to us. How do we reconcile? How do we navigate through realities like that?
Well, I think we need to realize that whoever are in positions of power are mere human beings. And though they may have the position that allows them to have the illusion of controlling events, they don't control them totally. And, there is the force of destiny also. And there is the force of human thought, which is no small thing. And then there is also the law of karma, which is also absolutely incontrovertible. And as long as people are doing actions which are harmful for another human being, that is classified as negative karma. And a person who uses their power to hurt many human beings, they're accumulating a debt, and that debt will have to get paid. And so they may be able to enjoy a little bit more than other people for a short time, but it's short-lived. And so knowing this do not give your power to the leaders. Even if you didn't vote in the way that the elections turned out, your vote is your thought. Your vote is what you do moment by moment in the day, and that has a lot of power. And if you're doing positive karma on a continuing basis, you're definitely going to accumulate the consequences of it, because that's the nature of the law of karma. But mostly people don't know about it, and so they give too much importance to what is perceived as people in power. They are so-called in power, but they're not having as much power as they might like to think. So remember your own power.
That is very uplifting, Sister Denise. Thank you very much. I have another question, a set of questions that I think these are 3 interrelated questions. So I'll read each one slowly. So have we reached the critical mass where real transformation is now taking place? And if yes, what still needs to be done by those who are aware and are slowly but surely contributing towards this transformation? And then lastly, will God intervene if our power is not enough?
Very interesting questions. I don't think we've reached a critical mass yet. We still need to build it more. So the last question, I think God has already intervened, but not in the visible way that most people anticipate. I think the intervention of God is very subtle and takes the form of this very, very pure, powerful energy which is around, but it's very subtle. And it's an invitation that take this energy into yourself and reflect this light out into the world. So the image for this is the moon. You see, everybody likes the full moon. You love to look at it at night. And what is the moon? It is the light that is reflected from the sun. And you can't just stand there in the day and look at the sun for more than just a moment, because it'll burn out your eyes. And so this is the thing. People cannot easily connect with that light. But if you can, and you do, and you reflect that light, then that light becomes visible to others who can then see, yeah, there is something going on which is very, very positive, and I just need to learn how to tune into that and absorb that into myself and start reflecting it, because the best way to get rid of darkness is put a bit of light. And in the night sky, when it's a new moon, for example, you don't see the light of the moon, but then what you see is the stars. Of course, when you're in the city, you don't see the stars because it's so polluted that you can't, but you kind of know they're there. And as soon as you go out to the country, you see them. So this is what draws people, is actually the light, and the darkness overwhelms them but doesn't really draw them. So I think we need to just make sure that we are oriented to the light, take that into ourselves and start reflecting it. And this is going to give a lot of comfort to others who start to be able to feel it, and then you can have the enthusiasm to get through the darkness.
Okay, thank you, Sister Denise. Here's a question. I am always afraid of making a decision that I know will hurt others. There is always fear of retaliation or rejection. How do I move forward?
Well, I think one needs to have a very different set of parameters. If a person gets upset with you and says you hurt them, it doesn't necessarily mean that you did the wrong thing. It's just that you didn't do what they wanted. And what they wanted was for you to do something which is not the right thing, even though it's convenient for them, but it's not correct karma. So you need to be aware that you have a conscience, and your conscience is a really good guide, the best of all possible guides. So listen to the voice of conscience. Do not go against your conscience. There may be a conflict of interest between your conscience and the conventional attitudes that people have about what's right and wrong and what you should and shouldn't do. But mostly people consider what's right is what's convenient for them, and what's wrong is what's inconvenient for them, and they don't go along with that because that's really stupid. So be afraid of doing the stupid thing, definitely, but do not be afraid of rejection, because anyway, so what? It's really important to be able to be in one's own power and alone, so that you can be with the light. And then what's going to happen? Who's rejecting you is people who you don't need anyway, and who will be drawn to you is people who are with the light like you. So what's wrong with that?
What about the influence of social media, Sister Denise? There is so much crisis out there. How can we cope with that when we are now much interconnected through social media?
Well, what you need to do is understand how social media works. And there's, I don't know if you can get it in the Philippines, but there's quite a lot of documentaries about how this works. And it's basically pretty much identical with drug dealers and how they get people hooked on various drugs. And so the social media is potentially very helpful, very useful, but it also has this dark side, and it is used by the people who operate it practically identically as how people get the kids especially hooked on various drugs. Look how there was this huge opioid crisis, and the company that made them was making a huge amount of money out of making people drug addicts instantly, and it was prescribed for anyone who had post-operative pain or chronic pain by the medical community, until eventually it was outlawed. But it took a great deal of effort on the part of activists to get that sorted out. And there are people who are becoming a little bit activist about the social media, but the thing is, the laws take a long time to put in place, and by that time a lot of damage is done. But people need to be aware that you have to, if you're going to use social media, don't become its victim. Use it for your purposes. But if you are weak and you are addictive and you sit there on your device like everybody and getting eaten up by the algorithms, then watch your back, look out for yourself. Do not allow them to do this to you. Keep your freedom.
Okay. I feel people's energy a lot, whether it's anger or sadness. How can I protect myself from someone's anger projected towards me, or even towards me or someone else, and not run away from confrontation?
Well, what shall I say? Embrace the tiger. You need to learn to hold your own. You see, you're a powerful being, and somebody's anger is a sign of weakness, and very weak people are violent towards people who are physically weaker than them. This is the basis of our wonderful patriarchal society, but you don't have to go along with that. And when you study and practice about spiritual principles, you actually develop the ability not to be taken over and taken in and overwhelmed by all that stuff. But you have to practice. And you may have been exposed to violence from a very young age, and your ability to protect yourself was destroyed right from the get-go, which means you have to learn all over again. And this is possible, but you also need to really understand your own power. And when your boundaries have been wrecked and your self-confidence has been destroyed and you have been projected on left and right, this is not an easy thing to do, but it is a possible thing to do. It's again a little bit like that, the imaginal selves of the butterfly. They're not concerned about the old dying caterpillar destroying them. They just come back again until they're stronger and they take over and they become the butterfly. So this is possible for you, but you have to decide that you're stronger than it. It's about deciding, facing.
Okay, Sister Denise, let's talk about organizations this time. So organizations or institutions have now become more conscious about their stewardship, and this has now become stewardship or responsibility, and this has now become pronounced in what we may call the ESG, or environment, social, and governance framework. How can institutions exercise good corporate karma beyond this framework?
I think that everything depends on the individuals, because you can have all sorts of rules and regulations and aims and objects, and you can have vision statements and you can have policies, but what stops it from happening is the individuals, and what makes it happen is the individuals. But the thing is, if you want to do something, some sacrifices involved. You can't give if you don't have, and a lot of people give because they don't have, thinking that they will get something by giving, and actually that doesn't work at all. You have to take time to empower yourself, because a weak individual cannot do good actions, and that's just the way it is. So you have to make yourself strong in your own inner state, a strong, resilient, loving. Remember who you are. Do not come under external influences, but take time to develop that. And again, I refer to what was mentioned earlier about balance. You can give and give and give and get burned out, and then you will resent, and then you will start doing the wrong thing. That's a very common pattern. But if you do what you can and not more than that, and don't feel guilty about not doing enough, that's a really bad policy. Understand that you're not responsible, but you must do your bit, and keep in balance and restore yourself regularly, and then I think you can be part of a very successful organization or gathering, but otherwise it will get corrupted.
Quite a tall order, Sister Denise, because that, I think that also means that you have to take care of your people. Is
Well,
that correct?
you do have to take care of your people, and if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of your people. Because your people can feel you. If they feel that you're in your power, they feel in their power. It's like parents with children. The child will look at the parent and see how the parent is responding to some or other situation. And it's not about what the parent says, it's about the state of mind of the parent. That's what influences the child. In the same way, if you're in a leadership position in an organization, they will look at you, they will watch you, they will feel your heart and your mind, and that will either empower them or disempower them.
So, it's a choice of making our minds our best friends or our worst enemies. This is the enigma of the mind, which continues to be the main source of all the darkness and disturbance in the world. Can you give us more practical tips on how to make it behave to our fullest advantage and to benefit the world?
Well, this is a quote from the Bhagavad Gita. Most people don't know that it comes from the Bhagavad Gita, but it does. You are your mind, yourself, your own best friend or your own worst enemy. So it's up to you as to which thoughts you entertain. You are not your mind, you have a mind. And the thoughts that arise in your mind come in front of you, and you can either say yes or no to sustaining those thoughts. But if you don't take command of your consciousness, then your mind will eat you up, and that's not so enigmatic. It's very clear, but the problem is people do not take spiritual power into themselves, and they have allowed their minds to take over, and they have abjured being expecting to be held accountable. But it doesn't work like that. You are accountable, including for whatever thoughts you entertain, and you must control your mind. You have the possibility. I'm not saying this is easy. Why it's difficult is because people have not bothered with it for centuries, and because they're very focused on the externals, and also they use repression. You see, repression is very, very counterproductive. If you repress yourself, that won't work. You repress other people, that won't work. You're just holding down a pressure cooker which is going to just burst. So you need to do it differently. Take spiritual power into yourselves and watch what's happening within yourself, and be careful not to entertain negative thoughts, because it will take over, just like social media.
Okay, Sister Denise, I think this is the last question from the audience, from the participants. How does one ensure that acceptance of the goings on around you does not descend or does not result to indifference or passivity instead of detached involvement?
Well, I think that's up to the individual, and I think it's also very much connected with taking care of your heart. The heart is the part of you that loves, and a person who doesn't love will just run out of that energy and become indifferent, because you haven't sustained your love for humanity, you haven't sustained your love for God. If you sustain that, then that energy will continue to flow. So it's this kind of responsibility to yourself. Do you understand who you are? Do you understand how important it is to operate from your essence and not just reflect what gets projected on you. That's not necessary at all. But it's common.
Sister Denise, there's just one more question. How does one maintain equanimity amidst injustice around and proactively struggle or resist it or struggle to fight, to correct injustice?
Well, there are many forces involved, and what we see as injustice is only what we see superficially, and there may be some karmic justice going on that you can't see. There is the possibility of that. Then there is destiny. So that's a force. And then there is, what should I do in front of whatever I see? And so you have to look and see, well, what can you do? Do you speak up? Or are you limited by fear of what another person asked, fear of rejection or fear of other people's reactions? So it's important to have the strength of your convictions. I think in facing injustice and questioning injustice, you need to apply due process, because there are processes there, and you need to do it fearlessly. And there are some things that are, beyond your jurisdiction, beyond your capability. We can't just be vigilantes. That doesn't work. And I don't think you can easily have equanimity in front of injustice, but what you can have is equanimity in front of what you see, because what you see is actions, interactions. When you classify it as injustice, then you're immediately bringing a value to it, which requires you to confront it, and it may just drain out your energy. So the equanimity is in front of what's in front of you, and then you have to see very carefully, okay, what is my part in this? What do I have to do so that there is so that things are right? And things are very, very complicated and complex because of all this other energies of karma and destiny and so on. So it's quite difficult to make a very informed decision, but consult your conscience. And when you consult your conscience a lot, it'll really start talking to you very wisely. And I believe very much in the power of the voice of conscience, provided you don't go against it. Do the right thing.
Thank you very much, Sister Denise. I had wanted to summarize what you have shared with us the whole afternoon, but I'm sure I will do injustice to what you have taught us or guided us with. Maybe just to end today's very uplifting and very challenging topic and program. I would just like to also, this is for myself, to go through what you have said and to reiterate some points that I find very valuable. So you started with helping us do some sense making of what crises are. And then you, of course, this one I really very appreciate that you mentioned parivartan, which is transformation, and there is a return to a pristine original state, not only within us, but also with the world or for the world. And then, of course, throughout your sharing, you emphasized and guided us into appreciating the power of metamorphosis, not the very kindergartenish, transformation from a caterpillar to a butterfly, but really you helped us appreciate the series of crises that happens inside the cocoon and the battle that the caterpillar has to experience with the imaginal cells, and of course later on having to let go, the need to let go of those and be able to transform into a butterfly. And then you helped us interpret crisis, which are exactly the meltdowns that happen inside the chrysalis. But this crisis is part of a transition, which we need to understand so we can be active participants in change. And that requires a lot of courage. And then you also said that during critical times, it is important to build strength. And the meditation exercises that you provided for us help us look inward and connect with the butterfly of our essential selves that is full of virtues and powers that we need to reconnect with and to understand, and then to harness so that we can navigate crisis, one crisis after another, whether it be in our own families, with ourselves, or in the society. And you mentioned that therefore it's very important to cultivate a meditation practice, because by doing so we can develop the spiritual power from our connection with the divine source. And the spiritual study, for us, it's Raj Yoga, so that we can strengthen or become more aware that we have these spiritual powers within us that we can remember and use through the times. And of course, during the open forum, you reminded us that empowering ourselves does not mean that we become so detached and aloof and passive about what's going on. We still need to do some action. In fact, it could be positive karma, but we have to, first of all, take care of ourselves, because only then, if we have the courage, etc., then we can benefit others who may be undergoing crisis within themselves because of the crisis that they see around. So that's it, Sister Denise. Maybe you'd like to highlight some more points to end today's program.
Well, I think you've highlighted everything most beautifully. Thank you so much for that. And I think it's a very good point that you raised the quote from the Gita, you are your own best friend or your own worst enemy. So it's up to you what thoughts you entertain in your mind. And if negative thoughts and feelings rise up, that's a cue to get above them and stay in your power and don't, succumb to those things. You can do it,
I like it very much that you are helping us see how much of what needs to be changed and what can be changed actually depends on ourselves, and of course a connection with God and with God as our divine source. There's a lot. You emphasize self-responsibility and opportunities to really stay in our own power and not be affected externally by what people say, what they expect. I like that very much. It's very empowering for me. So thank you very much, Sister Denise, for this afternoon session. Okay, so Now that we are, thank you, sister. Now that we are at the end of the program, may we invite everyone to turn on your videos so we can all, greet each other with our smiles and wave hello to each other. And at the same time, we would like to give a special thanks to our translators, for Sisters Marie Madeleine, our French translator, and then Leire for Spanish, Petra for German translation, Sister Mira for a Korean translation, and Sister Rose for the Chinese translation. We welcome everyone to visit our website. It's www.brahmakumaris.org. Okay, and then I'm sure you would like to spend more time to think about and work on what Sister Denise taught us or talked to us about this afternoon. So you can visit the YouTube channel of the Brahma Kumaris PH. We will upload a recording of today's program soon. And then to listen to other classes, lectures, and discussions by Sister Denise, please very much welcome to also visit her YouTube channel. We've posted the link here. Denise Lawrence, that's the YouTube channel of Sister Denise. So let's continue the study, the reflection, the practice, and the many other practical tips that Sister Denise gave us this afternoon to empower ourselves so that we can navigate through the crisis that we see around us. So thank you, everyone, and may you have a restful weekend. If you want to stay on and greet each other, now is the time. So thank you very much. Thank you.